Thunder rumbles ominously outside, its deep growls reverberating through the cabin walls. Sarah clings to my arm, her eyes wide with terror as we stare at the figure standing outside the window. His form is shrouded in darkness, barely discernible against the backdrop of the storm. Suddenly, a flash of lightning illuminates the scene, casting stark shadows that dance across the room. In that fleeting moment, I catch a glimpse of his sinister silhouette, framed by the intense glow of the lightning. He stands motionless, watching us with a malevolent intensity. The thunder crashes again, masking the sound of our breathing as we wait in tense anticipation. The figure moves, a slow, deliberate shift that sends a shiver down my spine. Rain pelts against the window, distorting our view of his gaunt face, twisted in an expression of rage and obsession. I grasp the poker from the fireplace, my hands slick with sweat, ready to defend us against whatever horror lurks beyond the glass. His eyes lock onto mine, and I realize with a sinking dread that he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants. "Who are you?" I manage to whisper, my voice barely audible over the raging storm. He raises a gloved hand and points directly at Sarah. "You," he rasps, his voice barely audible through the roar of the thunder. "You belong to me." It all began 6 weeks ago when Sarah and I decided to escape the hustle and bustle of city life. We found a quaint, secluded cabin in the woods, a perfect retreat where we could reconnect and find some peace. The real estate agent assured us it was a hidden gem, and the price was surprisingly affordable. Felt too good to be true. The cabin was rustic but charming, with a cozy fireplace and a large window that offered a stunning view of the surrounding forest. We moved in on a crisp autumn day, the leaves turning brilliant shades of red and gold. It felt like a fresh start, a place where we could leave our troubles behind. The first night in the cabin was peaceful. We lit a fire, cooked dinner, and enjoyed a bottle of wine while we talked about our plans for the future. The silence of the woods was a welcome change from the constant noise of the city. As the night wore on, we retired to the bedroom, feeling content and hopeful. Around midnight, I woke up to a strange feeling, a sense of being watched. I glanced at the window, but all I could see was darkness. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just my imagination, and went back to sleep. The next morning, Sarah mentioned she had heard whispers in the night. "Probably just the wind," I said, trying to reassure her. But deep down, I felt a gnawing unease that I couldn't quite explain. Over the next few days, unsettling signs began to appear. We would find objects moved from their places. Sarah's hairbrush on the kitchen table, my watch on the bathroom sink. At first, we laughed it off, joking about a mischievous spirit playing pranks on us. But the incidents became more frequent and harder to ignore. One evening, as we were sitting by the fire, we both heard it. A faint, rhythmic tapping on the window. We turned to look, but there was nothing there. I opened the door and stepped outside, peering into the darkness. The forest was silent, not even a breeze to rustle the leaves. I went back inside, trying to shake off the sense of foreboding. The first time we saw the figure, it was late at night. We had just settled into bed when Sarah gasped and pointed at the window. I followed her gaze and saw him, a dark silhouette standing outside, watching us. My blood ran cold. The figure was still, almost blending into the shadows, but his presence was unmistakable. "Who is that?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, my mind racing. I grabbed the flashlight from the bedside table and shone it towards the window. The figure vanished instantly, as if he had never been there. We spent the rest of the night huddled together, too frightened to sleep. The next day, we checked the area around the cabin but found no footprints, no signs of anyone having been there. It was as if the figure had materialized out of thin air. The sightings became more frequent, and the figure grew bolder. He appeared at different windows, sometimes in broad daylight. Each time, he would vanish the moment we tried to confront him. Our sense of security shattered, and and the cabin, once a sanctuary, became a place of fear and dread. One night, we heard scratching sounds at the back door. I grabbed a baseball bat and cautiously opened it, only to find deep gouges in the wood, as if made by claws. The figure was toying with us, wearing us down. We decided to call the police. The local sheriff, a grizzled man named Peterson, arrived and listened to our story with a skeptical look. He checked the property and found nothing unusual. "Probably just some kids messing with you," he said. "I'll keep an eye out, but there's not much I can do." Days turned into weeks, and our nerves were frayed to the breaking point. Sarah and I were constantly on edge, jumping at every little noise. We started keeping all the lights on at night, hoping the brightness would keep the figure at bay. But he seemed to thrive on our fear, becoming more aggressive. One evening, as we were preparing dinner, the kitchen window shattered. Glass flew everywhere, and we both ducked, covering our heads. When I looked up, the figure was there, staring at us through the broken window. His face was gaunt and hollow, eyes like black pits of endless despair. "Leave us alone," I shouted, grabbing a knife from the counter. The figure didn't move, his gaze locked onto mine. Sarah was sobbing, her hands shaking as she clung to me. The figure slowly raised a gloved hand and pointed at Sarah. "She knows," he whispered, his voice a chilling rasp that sent shivers down my spine. "She knows what she did." We spent the next day in a state of shock, trying to make sense of the figure's words. Sarah seemed particularly disturbed, her face pale and drawn. I pressed her for answers, but she remained silent, staring out the window with a haunted look in her eyes. That night, as we sat in the living room, the figure appeared again, this time at the front window. He pressed his face against the glass, and I could see his twisted features more clearly than ever. "Tell him," he hissed. "Tell him the truth." Sarah broke down, tears streaming down her face. "I can't take it anymore," she sobbed. "I have to tell you." She confided in me a haunting truth from her past. Prior to our meeting, she had been entangled in a harrowing marriage to a man named Mark Winters. He wasn't just any husband. He was abusive, manipulative, and utterly controlling. Her days were shadowed by fear, constantly living under his menacing presence, enduring his tormenting words and violent outbursts. In a desperate bid for freedom, she concocted a daring plan. Fearing for her life, she orchestrated her own demise, faking her death to break free from the clutches of her tormentor. With a new identity and a resolve as strong as steel, she fled to a distant city, hoping to bury her past along with her former self. Tonight, the terror reached its peak. Mark appeared again, his presence more menacing than ever. He banged on the windows, rattled the doors, and filled the cabin with his ghastly whispers. Sarah and I huddled in the living room, clutching each other, knowing we couldn't escape. Desperate, I grabbed the poker from the fireplace and stood my ground. "What do you want?" I shouted at the figure. "Why are you tormenting us?" He pointed at Sarah, his eyes burning with fury. "Justice," he rasped. "She must pay for what she did." "No," Sarah whimpered. "Please, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt anyone." Mark's rage seemed to intensify, and he lunged at the window, shattering the glass. I swung the poker at him, but he ducked and grabbed me, pulling me through the shards. We struggled, falling onto the floor, wrestling for control of the weapon. I managed to push him off and scramble to my feet, but he was fast, too fast. He pulled a knife from his belt, and with a swift, brutal motion, plunged it into my side. I screamed in pain, collapsing to the ground. Through the haze of agony, I saw him turn towards Sarah, who was frozen in terror. He moved towards her with terrifying calmness, as if savoring the moment. I tried to get up, to stop him, but my strength was fading fast. "No, please," I gasped. Sarah backed into a corner, her eyes wide with horror. "Mark, don't do this," she pleaded. "Please." Mark's face twisted into a cruel smile. "You can't escape me," he said. "You belong to me, Sarah. You always have."